This is in quotation marks because the entire purpose of this part of the presentation is to raise some major doubts about pretty much everything, including notions like the world and the self. Let's take a moment now to try to see if we can formulate a dichotomy between reality with capital R and reality with lowercase r. Imagine for a second that beyond the human senses, we just live in a cloud of particles. This is still, by the way, the contemporary standard traditional paradigm. For the purpose of this discussion, reality with capital R is what resides out there beyond what our senses is able to perceive. And reality with lowercase r is the human reality, is what we perceive and unthinkably identify as being objective reality independent from us. Within this reality, this human reality, of course, like I said, everything appears through the senses, including the body, including the perception of the body, including the extended senses. So we have the 5 senses we all know, but then if you count interoception and proprioception, so the way it feels to experience your body and bodily feelings from the inside, if you count those, I think we are at about 8 or 9. This is all basically appearance. This is all content. This is all what humans are able to experience and observe, including, and that includes themselves. So humans themselves are objects of observation inside this human reality. And of course, because we have these senses, 5, 8, or however many you want to count, actually, because they're a little bit lines in the sand, especially for those of us that have suffered from synesthesia and other afflictions like that. That cloud of particles, the dust of the stellar dust that we live in, looks like this. This is a picture from beautiful Heidelberg, one of actually my favorite city in Germany that I visited a few days ago. So that cloud of dust, because we have these senses, just looks like this. And this is what we, under the traditional paradigm, call objective reality. So of course, this is reality. I mean, I'm not dreaming, I'm not hallucinating, and I haven't eaten any mushrooms today. So this is reality. But we know now for sure that other types of organisms have different kind of senses. So for them, reality, maybe exactly the same reality, might be rendered in this kind of way. This is from a paper that's trying to simulate how particular type of insects is seeing. This, I feel, is doing other types of organisms and life forms a disfavor. We do know that other life forms are equipped with senses that we are completely clueless about, especially when it comes to our ability to experience those things directly. So this gives us a false dichotomy between, oh, our reality looks like amazing because we're so smart and can make the cloud of stardust look like this, but these other inferior creatures, you know, for them it looks like this. I don't think that's the case at all. I think the other creatures have access to areas of experience that we can't even map out, right? We can't even conceive of. So actually, that's beyond the power of representation of a human being. So we don't even know how to draw it or how to sing it or how to dance it, because it's just not within the realm of what we can possibly conceive. Okay, so we've established that there is a reality there with capital R, but each life form creates its own. The phrase that I like to use is each organism brings forth a different reality. Now, even within this framework, at this point, I'm still considering everything that I say traditional. Although it might have shaken a little bit, hopefully, this ingrained idea, in case any of you had it that what we see is objective reality. And the way it appears to us is objective in any form and not very much subjective and dependent on our species. So the reason why I'm still calling this the traditional way of seeing things is because of what's called the correspondence theory of truth. Everything I've just said still somehow implies that there is a homomorphism between the reality with capital R, the cloud of particles, and our sensorial apparatus. Homomorphism is a term that comes from mathematics and group theory that says that if you have two groups, there is a mapping that can be established between the two sets of elements present in those groups. So what this means is that we can say, all right, so we're different organisms, we have different abilities to render this reality. However, there is still some correspondence between what we perceive and the cloud of particles. We are not making things up. We're still perceiving what's there. It's just the form that differs. In addition to the correspondence theory of truth and homomorphism, I want to introduce you to two other angles. The first angle, which I'm going to talk about briefly because I've talked at length about this concept in other workshops and talks that I've given, is what Varela calls structural coupling. Varela, for those of you who are not familiar with the name, is considered the father of inactivism or embodied cognition. He was one of the first to really take seriously the fact that you do not have this singular human organism with its wonderful mind living as an independent entity inside an environment. He believed that the human organism, the individual, and the environment actually cannot be decoupled. They are completely enmeshed, although we might have the illusion that there's a boundary between the organism and the environment. And although many schools of thought, like cybernetics, for example, are based on the basic idea that there is a separation and a boundary between the organism and the environment, and information is being exchanged through that boundary. So how far did Varela take this concept? The example that I use is that we might usually hear the color of flowers being explained in terms of how they evolved to attract bees, because bees have certain senses and certain needs, and they their brains are responding to certain type of colors, so the flower was a response to that, or the other way around. And this is how we usually talk about characteristics of life forms. Varela says, no, that's completely not the case. That's a false way to explain things. Actually, the flowers and the bees and absolutely all types of life forms co-evolved. There was no point at which the flower developed a bright purple to attract a certain kind of butterfly that was already equipped and was looking for flowers that were purple. The flower developing the color purple and that particular butterfly evolved together. So everything evolved as a massive mutual need in this massive orchestra. There was nothing that was making large steps ahead of anything else. The second additional angle I want you to consider is this idea of the interface theory. Off the bat, this seems like it fits into what we've been discussing so far. So the interface theory says, all right, we have these different organisms, they're equipped with different sensors, and they render reality differently. So you can think of their sensors, and not just their sensor, their entire organism, mind, body, everything, the whole thing that contributes to the movie that you perceive as reality in your life as an interface. But what is being interfaced with is the same, it's just that what's being rendered is different. Your organism, your apparatus is determining how the interface sits between what you experience as you and the movie of your life and the reality, and whatever's the cloud of stardust. Donald Hoffman likes to use this example of the relationship between a folder on your computer desktop and the microprocessor that's actually generating the image of that folder. And he's using this as an example to showcase just how far that gap, like basically, if we go back to the homomorphism, just how far the gap we could be talking about, right? So there's still like a mapping, but the gap can be as large as the difference between the folder on your desktop and what's happening at the level of the microprocessor. It always helps me to adopt what I call like the extraterrestrial perspective on this. So if you imagine aliens are coming, for them, the way we're functioning might still look like the processor and what's happening in the processor. But the way we're actually picturing reality is more like the folder on the desktop. And then he says, okay, but then imagine that stuff like trees and houses and books and chairs and other people are actually like folders on your desktop. Yes, you can interact with them. Yes, they're predictable. Yes, they are persistent. It's a persistent reality. The folders on your desktop are persistent. They're still there unless Windows breaks down on you. However, we have to qualify to a large extent, bracket, what we mean when we say that the folder is real. In terms of like ontology, we're dealing with various levels of what's real. Because in this metaphor, at the end of the day, reality with capital R is a very, very simple infrastructure at the microprocessor level that is computational complete, but that nonetheless is manipulating ones and zeros. Okay, so I love the interface theory because one, like I said, it drives a beautiful wedge in this assumption that what we perceive must be pretty close to reality. So this is the Donald Hoffman example is great to kind of have people simmer down a little bit on that and realize that we're talking about something perhaps much wider. Okay, this is the world that you think you're in and you're doing all of this stuff. But reality with capital R might be something completely different. And then Hoffman is asking, wait a second, what if time and space are themselves properties of the interface? So time and space. So what if one, they're a human thing, and two, they're just a necessary emergent properties out of this interface. And this is where things for me start to depart from a traditional way of understanding reality and who we are. And I know the objections that are gonna come. The most common of them start with something like this. Okay, but none of this stuff really affects the human scale, right? In one sense, these do not affect the human experience. But what we're talking about here is not the human experience. What we're talking about is the fundamental way in which we understand our role in reality and the fundamental guidelines that we're using to develop science and technology. It's important to re-examine these things beyond the human experience, which, yes, indeed does perceive time and space as being real and so on. First, we have other life forms that we already know do not perceive even time and space the same way that we do. I can talk for a long time about how scientists believe plants experience space and reality and time, definitely not like us in any way. And then, of course, part of the topic of the workshop is that now we also have, for the first time, synthetic intelligent agents among us. And we can discuss like how intelligent are they and is that the right word for them. But even if you're not a big fan, the truth is that we have entered a computational paradigm where it feels to us, at least on the consumer side, quite suddenly there are other agents out there capable of interrogating nature and drawing conclusions about the big picture fundamentals of it. So it's quite fundamentally not just about human experience and not just about human scale and not just about the human relationship to reality. There are other things in play as well.